It didn't mean anything. The language of deflection. There is a moment, quiet and often unassuming, when a man is caught in a moral contradiction so potent it threatens to unravel the architecture of his soul. It is not loud, it is not cinematic, it does not always arrive with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes in a simple question. Is there something you need to tell me? And in that suspended second, before he speaks, everything hangs in the balance. He has crossed a line, not just in his relationship, but within himself. He has stepped outside the boundaries he once believed defined him. Maybe he once said, "I would never do that." Maybe he judged other men who did. Maybe he built part of his identity around being loyal, being disciplined, being different. And now that identity trembles. And when confronted, the first thing he says is rarely, "I betrayed you." Instead, he says, "It didn't mean anything." Pause there. That phrase is not just a defense, it is a desperate attempt to erase meaning. It is linguistic damage control. If he can shrink the act, if he can strip it of emotional weight, if he can frame it as empty and insignificant, then maybe, just maybe, the consequences will shrink with it. He is trying to reduce the betrayal to something hollow, accidental, morally weightless. He wants it to exist in a vacuum, disconnected from his character, detached from his values, isolated from the narrative of who he believes himself to be. But the soul does not work that way. You cannot compartmentalize character. You cannot seal off one room of the psyche and expect the rest of the structure to remain intact. Integrity is not a house with soundproof walls. It is a single foundation. When one part cracks, the tremor travels through the whole. If he doesn't say, "It didn't mean anything," he might say, "It was a mistake." That sounds softer, more responsible, almost humble. But cheating is not a spilled cup of coffee. It is not a typo. It is not grammar. It is a series of choices. He chose to respond to the message. He chose to continue the conversation. He chose to hide the notifications. He chose to lie about where he was. He chose secrecy when honesty was available. Each step required intention. Each moment presented an exit ramp, and at every juncture he decided to proceed. So when he calls it a mistake, what he is often doing is compressing a chain of deliberate decisions into a single accidental event. It is easier to apologize for a moment than to account for a pattern. And when caught, he reaches for these words because he is terrified, not just of losing the relationship, but of confronting who he has become. The fear is deeper than exposure. It is existential. He is not just afraid of your judgment. He is afraid of the mirror. Afraid that if he looks too closely, he will see not a good man who did a bad thing, but a man who abandoned his own standards when they became inconvenient. Afraid that the image he curated for himself, loyal, strong, principled, no longer fits. So he tries to soften the truth with language. He tries to negotiate with reality. He tries to convince you and himself that it was small. But the weight of betrayal is not determined by the words used to describe it. It is determined by the trust it shattered. The psychological fracture behind betrayal. Cheating is rarely spontaneous. It may look impulsive on the surface, a sudden lapse in judgment, a reckless night, a moment of weakness, but more often than not, it is the final symptom of something that has been quietly decaying for a long time. Infidelity is usually not the beginning of the problem. It is the exposure of it. A man who cheats often suffers from a fracture within himself long before he ever crosses a physical line. That fracture is subtle at first. It may begin as dissatisfaction he never voices, resentment he never confronts, insecurity he refuses to admit. Over time, that unaddressed tension grows into division. One part of him genuinely wants loyalty and love. He wants stability. He wants admiration. He wants the comfort of being chosen and trusted.
He may even deeply care about the woman he is with. But another part of him wants escape and fantasy. It wants novelty. It wants to feel desired without obligation. It wants the thrill without the weight. And when these two sides are at war inside him, when commitment feels heavy and temptation feels light, integrity begins to erode. Integrity requires unity. It requires that your desires and your values are aligned. When they are not, when a man feeds the side of himself that seeks excitement over the side that seeks responsibility, the collapse is only a matter of time. Some men cheat not from overwhelming lust, but from fear. Fear of being fully seen, fear of emotional exposure, fear of not measuring up, fear of the demands that real intimacy brings. Because real intimacy is not just passion, it is transparency, it is accountability, it is allowing someone to see your flaws, your doubts, your insecurities, and that level of visibility can feel threatening to a man who has built his identity around appearing strong and in control. So instead of deepening connection, he escapes it. He craves validation, the quick ego boost of a flirtation, the rush of being admired by someone new, but he cannot handle the vulnerability that sustains long-term intimacy. Validation feels powerful because it requires no sacrifice. Intimacy feels dangerous because it demands honesty. And so he builds a double life, not just externally, with hidden messages, secret meetings, altered schedules, but internally. He becomes divided. He presents one version of himself to his partner, loyal, stable, dependable, and he feeds another version in private, impulsive, restless, entitled. That inner split is the real betrayal long before the physical one happens. And when a woman discovers the betrayal, her first instinct is often self-interrogation. Was I not enough? Did I miss something? Was I too distant, too demanding, not attractive enough? These questions are natural. They come from a place of hurt. But cheating says far more about the betrayer than the betrayed. It reveals a deficiency in character, not a deficiency in worth. A man who cannot manage his impulses, who cannot confront his dissatisfaction with honesty, who cannot communicate his fears without escaping into secrecy, that is not strength. That is weakness disguised as masculinity. Because true strength is not indulgence, it is restraint. True masculinity is not about taking what you can when the opportunity presents itself. It is about protecting what you vowed to guard, especially when no one is watching. It is about saying no to yourself in order to say yes to your commitments. Anyone can chase novelty. It takes discipline to preserve loyalty. Anyone can pursue desire. It takes character to defend a promise. And a man who understands that does not cheat because he is tempted. He remains faithful because he understands that the measure of a man is not what he can acquire, but what he can honor.
The lie he tells himself. Before the betrayal, he tells himself stories. Not dramatic ones, not villainous ones, quiet, convenient narratives that soften the edges of what he is about to do. She doesn't understand me. We've grown apart. This doesn't count. Just this once. These phrases are not random. They are psychological permission slips. They are the small internal negotiations that make a future violation feel justified in the present. Because very few men wake up and decide, today I will destroy trust. What happens instead is slower. He reframes reality until the line no longer feels like a line. She doesn't understand me becomes a way to turn personal dissatisfaction into emotional abandonment. If he feels unseen, he convinces himself he is entitled to seek visibility elsewhere. We've grown apart becomes a quiet resignation, as though distance automatically excuses disloyalty, as though drift removes responsibility. This doesn't count, minimizes the early stages. It's just texting, just flirting, just attention. He redraws the boundaries in his favor. And just this once is perhaps the most dangerous of all, because it implies control. It implies this is a contained event, a single indulgence, a sealed compartment that won't leak into the rest of his life. But once the act is done, the story changes. It didn't mean anything. It's over now. She doesn't know. It won't hurt her. Now the narrative is no longer about permission. It is about damage control. It didn't mean anything shrinks the moral weight. It's over now rushes the healing process before it begins. She doesn't know. It won't hurt her attempts to separate truth from consequence. But these are not just lies told to his partner. They are lies told to himself. And the self cannot thrive on deception. When a man repeatedly tells himself a version of reality that contradicts his deeper moral awareness, something fractures internally. Integrity depends on alignment between what you do and what you believe. Each rationalization pulls those two further apart. Each excuse distances him from integrity. Each justification dulls his sensitivity to truth. Over time, he becomes divided. On the outside, life appears normal. He laughs with friends. He works. He shows up. He may even continue dating, loving, promising. The performance remains intact. But inside, he carries something heavy. Guilt. Not always loud guilt. Sometimes it is subtle. A tension in his chest, an irritability he cannot explain, a defensiveness when certain topics arise. Sometimes it shows up as anxiety, sometimes as detachment, sometimes as suspicion towards others because he knows what he himself is capable of. The conscience does not die. You can numb it. You can drown it in alcohol, distraction, or constant noise. You can bury it under productivity or ego. But it waits. And eventually, when you are alone, when the room is quiet, when the phone is off, when there is no one left to perform for, it whispers, "You knew better." That whisper is not cruel. It is honest. It reminds him of the moment he could have chosen differently, the exit he ignored, the value he abandoned. And if he refuses to face it, that whisper grows louder over time. What begins as discomfort can become shame. What begins as tension can become internal chaos. Because living divided, presenting one version of yourself while hiding another, is exhausting. It erodes peace. It fractures identity. It makes intimacy shallow because part of him is always guarded, always protecting the secret. And that whisper, if left unaddressed, can become unbearable. Not because of what he did alone, but because of what he became while pretending it didn't matter. The only path to redemption. There is another man. A man who cheats, yes. A man who fails. A man who crosses the line and feels it wait. He is not perfect. He is not immune to temptation. He is not some mythical figure untouched by weakness. But when the truth comes to light, he does something radically different. Instead of minimizing, he admits. Instead of explaining, he examines. Instead of running, he remains. He does not rush to soften the blow with clever language. He does not hide behind phrases like, "It didn't mean anything," or "It was just a mistake." He does not immediately shift focus to what was lacking in the relationship or what he wasn't getting. He says, "I did this. I betrayed your trust, and I need to understand why." Those words are not dramatic, they are not polished, but they are powerful because they carry ownership. That is where transformation begins, not with excuses, not with semantic gymnastics, not with carefully crafted apologies designed to calm the storm as quickly as possible, but with responsibility, deep responsibility, the kind that doesn't blame loneliness, alcohol, opportunity, or unmet needs. The kind that doesn't subtly imply, "If you had been different, I wouldn't have done this." The kind that says, "No one forced my hand, I chose." Because guilt, when faced properly, is not toxic, it is purifying. Guilt is the soul's alarm system. It signals that something sacred was violated.
When a man allows himself to fully feel that guilt, without numbing it, without defending against it, it burns away illusion, it strips him of arrogance, it confronts him with truth. The man who truly repents does not just apologize. Anyone can say, "I'm sorry." Anyone can cry when caught. Anyone can promise change in the heat of consequences. But the man who is serious about redemption becomes someone who could never do it again, not because he fears being caught, but because he understands what it cost him internally. He asks himself hard questions. What was I really chasing? Validation? Power? Novelty? The thrill of being desired? An escape from boredom? Unspoken resentment I never had the courage to articulate? A fear of aging? A need to feel significant? He does not ask these questions to justify himself. He asks them to expose himself to himself. Because if you do not understand why you fell, you will never know how to stand again. If you treat betrayal as an isolated incident, you will miss the pattern beneath it. If you focus only on repairing the relationship without repairing your character, the foundation remains cracked. And that is the difference. The man who says it didn't mean anything is still asleep. He is protecting his ego. He is preserving an image. He is more concerned with reducing consequences than confronting truth. The man who says, "I did this," is waking up. He is allowing the illusion of who he thought he was to collapse. He is accepting that he is capable of harming someone he loves. He is choosing discomfort over denial. And awakening is painful. It requires humility. It requires patience. It requires enduring the consequences without demanding instant forgiveness. It requires rebuilding trust, slowly, stone by stone, through consistent action rather than persuasive words. But awakening is also sacred, because in that painful clarity lies the possibility of becoming whole again. Not the man he pretended to be, but a stronger, integrated man who understands his weakness and chooses integrity anyway. That is redemption, and it begins with 3 simple, terrifying words. I did this.
If this video helped you understand emotional infidelity, drop a comment below. Your story could help someone else. Like the video if it gave you clarity, and share it with anyone who might need this insight. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to catch our next video on building stronger, healthier relationships. Remember, you deserve transparency, emotional safety, and to always be the priority.